Come on. I didn't even get that usual prompt that says the meeting's being recorded. Okay. So just for folks, in case you haven't had an opportunity to go out and do what I do, which is stalk Mark in terms of what he's done. Mark's recognized by AdAge Magazine as a marketing technology trailblazer, which means he's recognized as one of the top 25 individuals in the entire world in terms of using data and technology for marketing and sales. He brings decades of experience creating revenue systems that integrate sales function, the marketing function, and recurring expansion revenue in terms of B2B software as a service and professional services. So he helps organizations navigate long sales cycles and complex buying committees to secure large contracts. Also, if you haven't checked it out, I've already read it. I suggest you do the same. He's the author of a really kick-ass book called Are Your Leads Killing Your Business? Holler! It's right there. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to step aside. Mark, podium is all yours.
Thanks so much for having me, Ethan. And for anyone that's interested, I'm happy to give a free copy of the book, free download to anyone that would like to jump in on it. But
Now you tell me.
something that I've been having conversations, as I travel around. I actually just came back from a conference this week in Austin. And we spent a lot of time talking about, sort of growth and kind of marketing and sales funnels, and that fundamentally the approach that folks are taking as they go to market is broken because it's missing some kind of some key understanding of how businesses grow. And I'm going to share a couple slides that I think will sort of drive our conversation here with this roundtable group. But it's sort of a truism that revenue comes from impact. That's how the game is played. If you don't make impact for a customer, they're not going to give you money. And just like in Monopoly, you got to get around the board to make that impact. The problem with sort of revenue and what we're being charged to do as marketing, sales, customer success leaders is that the same amount of growth becomes progressively less interesting. $1 million a year in growth. The next year, that's 100% growth. The next year, it's only 50%. You lose 75% of that growth rate with that same volume of growth. And even if you are able to maintain that, you're not getting that exponential curve that everyone's really looking for. And the reason is that there's some challenges that happen. The first is acquisition revenue stalls out. Even if you're first to market, if you do a great job, if you have a really compelling product, by a few years in, your competitors will notice, or new competitors will arise, and so that revenue starts to stall out or even shrink from an acquisition perspective. And then as we think about the typical sales funnel, it's only focused on acquisition, and that's just really not sustainable or scalable if we only think about the funnel from that lens. If we want to get that exponential growth that we're looking for, we have to think beyond initial impact and initial revenue and think about recurring impact and that revenue that comes over time. And so if we come back to this same chart here, retention revenue continues to grow even as acquisition starts to fall out and at a much lower cost, because it's much easier to get additional revenues from an existing customer than it is to acquire new customers. And then once we layer in the expansion revenue that comes from there, that's how we really get at this exponential curve that everyone's looking for. And oftentimes, by about year 4, acquisition is smaller than your retention revenue if you're doing a decent job of not experiencing too much churn. And then likewise, your expansion revenue outpaces acquisition by about year 7. For many companies. And it's these sort of different phases of growth that really sort of drives the strategy that leads these companies. And so by going beyond the sales funnel into what we think of today as this bow tie funnel that puts as much emphasis visually on what happens after that first sale as what happens in that first sale, that's where we get the real opportunity for this exponential growth. And by building a framework that tracks metrics against each of these different stages of the bow tie funnel, moving beyond that first sale and really focusing and aligning the entire organization on recurring impact, that's how we really sort of achieve that growth that we're looking for. Um, so I think I see a question there from you, Ethan. So I'm going to pop over and say, what are your thoughts?
No, I just, before we went too far afield in my little brain, I wanted to ask a question about something that seems pervasive. Like every conversation I have with somebody who's tasked with acquiring new clients
Yeah.
and retaining existing clients. I guess, do you have any thoughts or kind of actionable strategies on how do we break the clutter of the noise that's out there with competition in terms of LinkedIn, YouTube, the other traditional sales channels being so saturated? How do we get our message across? And then the other thing is, I every conversation I have with somebody is I'm not ready to do business. I've been talking to them for a while. I'm not ready to commit to you because I just don't know what's going on, or all this crazy insanity. How do we kind of push this model so that we can achieve that exponential curve in these times?
Yeah. So the first question was about, how to stand out from an acquisition perspective. And one thing that we see is that, there are kind of consistent challenges that companies have at different parts of their sort of growth trajectory. And they're actually fairly predictable because companies tend to grow in similar ways in terms of how they go from that initial stage of acquiring new customers into a stage where retention is more important and into a stage where expansion is more important. And there's actually a lot of research that's been done on this. I'll share a few more slides here. Um, that sort of looks at how do companies grow from early stage startups up until billion-dollar enterprises, and it's a fairly consistent path that happens as companies travel up, and there's some predictable sort of phases at each of these stages, going for that first million to the sort of next million, and each of these stages actually has sort of known challenges and solutions. And one of the things that you talked about just there, Ethan, was two things that are really sort of prime opportunities for growth in the early stages. And the first is that real differentiation as you're achieving that sort of product market fit and go to market fit within the sort of first million up to about 10 million. That's where you have to really understand better than anyone else what your customers care about, what your competitors are doing, and then how what you do is different vis-a-vis your competitors and in the overlap with your customers. And very often when companies stall out at around this $10 million mark or even approaching 20 million, it's because they didn't take the time early on to gain that really deep understanding of the customers, the competitive landscape, and their own unique differentiation. They had a product and they took it to market and they got some sales and they just kind of kept going with it. And that got them, to this certain stage. But then when they hit this roadblock, it's because they didn't accomplish these, sort of objectives that are sort of known challenges earlier in the process. And that's why they're being held back and not able to progress and not able to pass go, I like to say, and not able to have that opportunity to really continue that growth phase. The other thing that you talked about that I think, in times of uncertainty is particularly important is how we package and price. And again, very often companies don't take the time to do a very robust analysis of the sort of pricing and packaging that their customers are looking for. And so, you described folks that, have this feeling of, I can't move forward because of uncertainty in the marketplace or because of other things, or maybe it's just a cash flow issue. If you have taken the time for your product to really understand your customer and that they have those particular types of needs, you can come up with the pricing and packaging options that aligns to what they need and how they need to buy. And by developing those types of solutions, and in fact, that's pretty foundational, but a lot of companies fail to do it. They just sort of price the materials or what do we think we can charge for it and go to the marketplace instead of thinking through the value exchange of my customer invest this amount of time, invest this amount of resources, invest this amount of money and what they pay me, and what are they getting out on the other side of that equation? And then what are some ways that we can align that equation to their business so that they're getting outsized value early on, which then opens the door for that retention and expansion, which is where that S-shaped curve really comes from. Did that get at the question there, Ethan?
Yes, thank you. And I'm going to defer and leave it up to other folks that may have questions as you walk through the methodology. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and that's a good inflection point. What has this group seen as it relates to, sort of the idea of moving beyond a traditional sales funnel, and looking at, more of a bow tie funnel that puts as much emphasis on, retention and expansion revenue as it does on initial acquisition revenue?
Mark, we just reorged our sales team this year to include a growth and retention group, which I'm now a part of. So we've got a growth and retention group, a new business group, and then a specific product group. So we divided our team into 3 separate teams this year.
How has that borne out so far?
Well, it's early on, but a couple of the clients that I've inherited have said that they haven't talked to anyone in years.
Oh,
I've uncovered probably about $1 million in new opportunities in a short period of time, but just by having some conversation.
so just the organization choosing to just even kind of talk about it openly as a goal and objective has led to some really sort of valuable restructuring.
Yep. Yep.
Anyone else had any experience with organizations as they've kind of moved beyond just a traditional funnel, or even just kind of opening the aperture a little bit around organizing for recurring impact instead of just the promise of impact as you do with that initial sale?
Yeah, I'll jump in, Mark. One of the challenges, or flip that, one of the opportunities that I'm finding, and I don't know what other people think, I'd love to hear from them, is to build the retention piece of the existing client engagements. I'm trying to consciously think of every step of the relationship to move away from a transaction approach to more of a relationship cultivation through a service model. I do that in my membership groups. So I'm trying to share information, white papers, research findings, opportunities to speak at conferences, and I'm sharing that with clients. And I find that that's working a lot more effectively than just asking for the renewal.
That's right.
Yeah, and I think I would actually say the same thing, Ethan, that what I'm finding is it's about the relationship. And I find opportunity in conversations with my clients to jump in after I've listened to what they're going through. And I provide, some valuable input as to maybe something they weren't thinking about. And that's helping me kind of move a little bit more into retention and some expansion with what I'm doing with my current client. But it's all about listening for me. That's what I think works.
That's right. Yeah, we see that this sort of framework of metrics across, throughout the funnel really just creates a lot of focus and the ability to sort of understand, well, where is the opportunity? And to provide a little more focus, we also like to kind of think about them as 3 interlocking systems. You got the attraction systems that are, it's all about building that awareness, consideration, differentiation in the marketplace. that then brings people to you. Now you need to accelerate those best opportunities through the sales pipeline so that you're capturing that initial sale. And then to have a whole nother set of systems around activation, which allow you to activate those existing clients for fast renewals, larger upsells, more referrals. But just by kind of putting out there that you have expressed intent around developing these 3 different systems, around measuring the KPIs throughout these 3 different systems, but thinking of them as one interlocking overall funnel, that changes the dynamic for organizations pretty dramatically. And you can then start to either benchmark against a competitive set or benchmark against yourself on, well, what is our conversion rate from, an initial engagement to that next engagement, moving into adoption. And then, defining each of these moments that matter throughout this journey. How do we align our activities to the things that are going to make an impact? Whether that's having expressed time for, listening again, whether that's having expressed content that you're creating that helps them understand how you continue to work together and they continue to receive value from working with you, rather than just sort of the assumption of, well, that's what the customer success team does. And that's what sort of drives that, and really the only thing that's necessary for driving that.
Mark, can I ask a question? Because most, if not all of us, find, acquire, and retain clients based on providing consulting, knowledge, subject matter expertise. For those of us in that role, once you acquire the client, you get past the onboard. Are there specific recommendations you make for maximizing the impact phase with the adoption? Like, how do we do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a trend that I've been seeing in the marketplace and that I hear from, both colleagues as well as prospects, which is the proliferation of software. I mean, I think it was Andreessen that said, software is going to eat the world. And in fact, maybe it already has. Maybe it's now come back for seconds. But what that has meant is an explosion in the capability that exists with minimal effort to create software, as well as the capability that exists in terms of just the people that can help you develop it, so that many professional services consulting firms that once upon a time saw themselves as only a discrete engagement, you need X, I'm going to come in and I'm going to deliver X for you, and then I'm going to go away, and now I'm going to go find someone else to sell X to, and maybe I'm going to come back to you in a year and see if you want to do X again. That kind of transactional consulting engagement model has really evolved using software to become an ongoing opportunity for impact. And I'll use an example that's an easy one, but we can, pick apart some other examples as well. I used to pay my accountant or, bookkeeper or finance person, once a year to do my taxes for me. And so there was that discrete consulting engagement. And then he went away, and maybe I came back to him the next year, maybe I didn't. It's now, using software either off the shelf or that he could really easily design, very inexpensive for him to say, look, I've developed a piece of software for you that actually helps you do a better job of preparing for your taxes. It's only $20 a month. It's going to guide you in doing all the things that you need to do. And it's going to make sure that you have a better experience with me when we come back and work together next year. Isn't that a value? And the answer is yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so that he turned a one-time transactional engagement into a recurring revenue opportunity by leveraging software. And he moved from, a service, a purely sort of professional services engagement, to kind of software with a service or software as a service, however you want to define that. In fact, there's a gentleman who is the, sort of the SaaS CFO and his name's escaping me right now, but he recently launched a piece of software that works with your accounts receivable, that will guide, and in fact I think it's sort of AI enabled, so that you can set up, well, anytime something goes into 29 days on a 30-day bill, they get an automated email that comes from the AI, that opens up a chat window when the client engages with that email, where it then guides a dialogue of conversation on accelerating that payment, through to the client. So he used to do consulting where he said, you need to get your accounts receivable under control, and here's a bunch of strategies that will help you get your accounts receivable under control. Now he has software that underpins that makes for an ongoing recurring impact in his clients that they're willing to pay him for on a recurring basis.
Yeah, and I know that, one of the greatest things for me is, as I discuss things with my clients and I'm listening to them, the ability to take something and throw ideas into AI and then come back with a bunch of ideas and convert it, of course, into my own language is it's such a quick turnaround. You can really have an impact on that client. And they're like fairly impressed that you can turn around some new product. For me, it could be a succession plan, something that fits the organization, where I started out with talent acquisition. Now I can do succession planning for you. And this are a couple of models we could use. And that ability to use that software is what helps kind of move things along to the next phase.
That's right. Well, and we're also seeing, again, at this conference, obviously AI is a big topic right now.
Yeah.
But what some of the folks were talking about is the ability to even take you out of that process a little more by leveraging tools like Make or Zapier, where as soon as you create, sort of the, kind of talent acquisition plan for them, it takes everything that you learned in that process and then just immediately generates for you the succession plan that you can take to them, so that you don't even have to, press a button. It is automatically generated. Now you've got it, and all you got to do is, put your thought against it, instead of actually, spending time on the creation of it.
Yeah.
Hey, Mark, one of the things I struggle with mightily is, do you have any best practice for the client acquisition phase, the upfront, how we do a more effective job pre-qualifying leads based on marrying what the potential client needs with what we can deliver, so that there's less of the kind of shotgun approach and more of the sniper rifle approach?
Yeah, and this falls under, what I was talking about before about those attraction systems. And what we see so often is that companies are really resistant to going the extra mile in how they build out their, ideal customer profile, buyer personas. And, you say, well, who's your customer? Well, anybody with a checkbook. Well, that can't be true, because if you're for everyone, you're for no one. And so we see that companies that get a little more precise and say, well, these firmographics, sure. This kind of business model, sure. That has this kind of, need, sure. Those are really kind of table stakes. Today, what we see is the folks that are really doing a much better job are going into the context that business is operating in. So I'll use an example of, a customer relationship management system. Everybody needs one, and so any business is gonna need one, but some businesses need one because they have a few very important prospects that they have to be on top of everything all the time. Others need one because they have lots of volume of prospects that they need to be able to keep up with. Okay, so those are two very different use cases for a CRM. And so a company that sort of understands, does our product work better for, the context A or context B, Now then, how do we define the people that we go after through our unique differentiation and through our expertise? And then when folks from the other group come to us and ask, can we buy your product? To have the guts to say, sure, but I'm not going to give you the same attention that I would to someone from this other category, because that's where we add the most value. That's what we're really expert at. And so you're not necessarily saying no to certain opportunities, but you're definitely not putting the same number of resources on closing those deals, because there's only so many hours in the day. If you're peanut butter spreading your resources across every deal in the marketplace, well, your competitors are not. Your competitors have built an ICP and built a scoring mechanism that allows them to identify their best opportunities, and they're putting all of the resources necessary to win those best opportunities for them into the marketplace. And if you're giving the same attention to your bad fit customers as your best fit customers, you're going to wind up not winning either, because you got to put all of your energy on those best fit customers. So it's taking the time, Ethan, to really define that ICP, to really define the types of buyer personas that you wind up working best with, and then using some scoring mechanism to say which of these deserves all of our resources to win this deal and this opportunity, versus which do we sort of allow them to buy if they want to, but we don't provide much discount or sort of attention in the process.
Yeah, I love that, because it contradicts the pushback I often get from people who sell what they do for a living is, yeah, but if I do that, Mark, then I may be potentially leaving deal flow on the table because I'm missing out on the things that I can do, even if you haven't used any kind of scoring mechanism to prioritize. So that makes perfect sense to me. I just struggle with practicing it.
That's right. I mean, it's a discipline, but it also is the discipline that unlocks, sort of future growth, because it leads to a better repeatable process. And actually, I've got a little bit of content, on the repeatable process challenge that that people deal with, which is, so often companies are sort of, again, hesitant to commit to a particular strategy, which evolves around a very specific customer. But what we see is, companies on this sort of growth curve of they're getting some revenue. And we'll take sort of two example companies, Acme and Nuco. So they launched their first go-to-market motion, and go-to-market motion is defined as, specific acquisition strategy for a specific customer with a specific product. But things don't go smoothly, as we've all experienced, where you get some instability and some sort of not obvious growth. And that instability causes a lot of fear and trepidation. And so in this example, the Acme company, well, maybe let's expand to another ICP, as we were just talking about, or maybe let's change our product up a little bit to try to speak to this other audience or this other group. But because there's only so many hours in the day, they're missing the opportunity to build expertise. Nuco stayed with the strategy, continued to work on it, refined it. They got it figured out. They hammered away on the right strategy, and then that stabilized and caused this sort of growth. Because Acme got distracted, it took them quite a bit longer to experience that same growth curve that they would have gotten if they had really just sort of committed to one particular strategy. Not only that, but Nuco is now better than Acme because they've been doing it longer. So they're building a higher wall and a deeper moat, and really creating an opportunity for category domination in a way that Acme is quite a bit farther behind in their growth trajectory.
Anybody have any
That's an interesting
questions?
slide. No, I think that's a great slide when you consider, for those of us, we do different things, and it's, have a repeatable process. And once you've listened to what the needs are, don't keep making changes and do something different. because you end
That's
up like
right.
Acme.
And the other thing that we see related to that too is that, so often companies sort of take throw the spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks approach. When it comes to sort of picking those, to picking that strategy. But, as we talked about, there's only so many hours in the day. And so you can't do everything well. You can kind of do one thing well. And so if, you know, if you're trying everything, then you're not committing to anything. And rather than just sort of try the latest thing that you heard at a conference or that someone said on a webinar, you take the time to strategically think through what's most likely to work for me and my business so that you can then make those choices that are strategically aligned. That then gives you the confidence to stick with it and to keep powering through instead of getting distracted by a new go-to-market motion. Because not only is it distracting for you and your company, but also it is, sort of a distraction from your customers as well. Because when they see you doing 20 different things in 20 different ways, then they feel like, well, are you really for me or not? Because they're seeing it sort of all over the place in terms of how you're messaging to the market and what you're saying you do and who you're saying you're perfectly designed for and how much of your business is focused on just that acquisition versus what's that focused on that recurring impact. And the way that we guide that is to sort of pick a go-to-market motion based on a strategy. So what volume of customers do you expect to serve in a year? What, size of revenue do you expect from those different customers? And then based on where you expect your company to be operating, pick a go-to-market approach that's strategic, that's aligned with where you're likely to, sort of, have the right volume and have the right revenues, which then guides the way that you craft your go-to-market motions, whether it's very high touch or very low touch or sort of product-led growth versus, sales team-led growth. And instead of, well, let's try all of these and see which one works, you can kind of know at the start what's likely to work. And that comes back to that, sort of initial roadmap that I showed on. There are predictable challenges at each of these stages of growth. And so by focusing on what's likely to be your challenge at your stage of growth, you can have, much greater probability of success rather than just, kind of trying to do everything at once.
I really love the concept of marrying your messaging, regardless of the channels, to what your client needs and therefore understands you do that can solve their problems that keep them up at night. Like I find that that's a really big challenge for those of us who serve clients for a living.
Yeah, Ethan, I agree with you. And I think what's interesting is that, you look at what Mark's talking about, go to market, and how, the saying, if you do everything, you're not good at anything. I know as a coach, Ethan, you talk about that with your clients. Now we're seeing it in the advertising space that backs up, that says you really need to focus. A scattershot approach may get you a few clients in the short run, but they are more transactional than that last chart, which you showed on the far right, is more relationship driven and it's much longer term and strategic. So it kind of backs up, Ethan, what I know you say is a consultant. It marries data with that.
Yeah,
For sure.
and one thing that I think has been an interesting evolution. There's an entire generation of marketers that their entire career, filled with success, has been based primarily on tactics. And if we think about the first folks that started optimizing their websites to be found by search engines, when consumer behavior shifted to everyone uses search engines to find providers, well, that was a genius move. They had a windfall of customers, and a lot of success came from that. But That's not a strategy. That's a tactic. That's just one channel. Those same folks were oftentimes first to move on. Well, now let's buy some ads within search. We've optimized against that organic. Let's buy some ads within that. Again, it took a little longer for consumer behavior to catch on, but once it did, those paid search ads became again another windfall. Similarly, we saw that the first folks to move into buying particular platforms, whether it was Facebook or Instagram or even LinkedIn, that first move, you were able to arbitrage the difference between your competitors who weren't there. The thing is, though, that this pace of innovation is really impossible to keep up with. And I like to share this slide. The Marketing Technology Conference, puts together this overview of all of the different providers of
Oh, wow.
marketing technology. This is 2011. There were 150 logos, and they talked about what a giant, expansive landscape of tools, all of which promised to be that one silver bullet, that one thing that if you did, it would change your life. This last year, this landscape exploded to 14,000 different marketing data technology providers. It's impossible to keep up with that pace of change, and that's the idea that unfortunately has dominated marketing for at least 2 decades of find the next growth hack, find the next one of these little logos that's going to be the one thing that will change the game for you. But what we have seen in working with our clients is the real key is to not look for that one thing, that growth hack, but instead the new solution is actually a return to fundamentals, which is really understanding, strategically who your customers are and what they care about, what your competitors are doing and how you're different than that, so that you can have that messaging that then shows up where your customers are by building out that buyer's journey and how they go from awareness through deepening understanding, through making decisions, and then showing up where they are, not just the latest platform because someone else had some windfall come out of that platform because they were the first to be there among their competitors. Maybe that's not the right platform for you. It takes a strategic lens in order to know which platforms are right for you. And unfortunately, there's again an entire generation of marketers that have never had to think that way, and they've been quite successful, and many of which are now out there slinging their wares to other folks, and wondering why it doesn't really work that well, but they can sure buy some Facebook ads for you. Oh, you're on mute, Ethan.
Yeah, sorry. I want to just be sensitive to time, but I want to open up to anybody else who has parting questions, but I have one final question, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
So let's say we follow the framework, the methodology. We've done a pretty decent job at identifying our ideal client persona. We're in the right place. We're reaching out to the right folks. Any low-hanging fruit or immediately actionable strategies we can employ during the exploratory phase, or we're having that conversation with a potential client to marry for them what we do, the pain we resolve, the problems we solve, with having identified in their ideal persona what they are looking for from us. Like that to me still seems like the opportunity for us is to figure out how to have those conversations in a more meaningful way so they resonate with our potential clients.
Yeah, I think the low-lying fruit it's a bit of a razor's edge because it's a hard line to walk, but it is balancing two things. The first is understanding them and their problem, which normally comes from sort of questioning and discovery, but then the ability to move quickly into prescription based on expertise and demonstrating, let me validate a few things about your business. Okay, based on what I've seen from other businesses like yours, these are the things that you need to do. And I think that oftentimes companies, they get that equation wrong. They either jump straight into, I've got a hammer, let's go find some nails, or, well, let's really unpack, you and who you are, and let me think about it and figure out what needs to be done, which doesn't inspire a lot of confidence either. And so it's that delicate balance of doing enough diagnoses so that you can be accurately prescriptive, and really thinking through and not being bashful about, cops say, if you think the boyfriend did it, he probably did. Like, it's the same kind of thing. Like, if you think that the problem is that they haven't done X, that probably is. And so rather than forcing them to walk through the paces of a process of doing maybe all the right things, lead them faster to the thing that is going to make the impact.
Thank you. I appreciate that greatly. Any other final questions as we kind of wrap up today's training seminar? So Mark, question, if folks are a little bit bashful or they're digesting all of this content and they want to follow up with you, what's the best way to get in touch?
Sure. So as I mentioned, I'm happy to give a free copy of the book, modernrevenuestrategies.com/free download. You'll get not only the book, but all of the calculators and templates and sort of worksheets that you need to start to implement some of this in your business. And then I'll probably follow up with you personally if you download a copy of that. But also easy to reach, Mark with a K, like marketing, mark@modernrevenuestrategies.com. And I'd love to hear from anybody listening, and the opportunity to engage would be fantastic.
No, this is
Yeah, and just for the other folks, I will also, when I put this video together, I will put all of Mark's details in the description below, so you'll have all of his contact details right there.
Thank you, Mark. I've learned a lot today.
Oh,
Of really making sure that what I'm doing is going up from here and being very clear, being very focused. And then that's kind of, to your point, focusing on the fundamentals. And if let's say I'm talking to Ethan as a prospective client, letting Ethan know what some of his issues are that he needs to address, rather than waste his time and kind of pretend like we're, walking through this maze to figure it out, when Ethan's like, I don't have time for this. Just
that's right. Well, and also based on your expertise, that roadmap that I showed earlier that is somewhat based on research and somewhat based on my experience, you have that roadmap too. You know what clients that are dealing with your issues typically go through at different stages, and they're probably more predictable than the casual observer would suspect. But when you can sort of lay out that roadmap, it makes it a lot easier for them to trust you to guide them up that hill.
Yep.
So I just want to say again, on behalf of everybody, hey, Mark, thank you so much for taking time today to share your kind of thought process on the sales framework. And just to let everybody know, I'm going to put the recording up and I'll send everybody the link, and you'll have the opportunity to digest all this amazing content. So unless there are any final questions or comments, we'll call it a session. Hey, Mark,
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time to connect with me and let me share some thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Mark, for your expertise and your insights. Thank you.
Thanks,
My pleasure.
Ethan.
Thank you.
Mark.
Appreciate it.